Pat Sajak has announced his retirement plans as his 40-year career on Wheel of Fortune comes to an end this week. His daughter Maggie, 29, who is the game show's social media correspondent, tear up at the plans that will make him perfectly happy. The father-daughter duo sat down for an exclusive interview with Good Morning America. Pat, 77, talked about how he felt about his longtime gig coming to an end and what he plans to do with all of his free time while is open to new projects. Pat is looking forward to the simple life. I'm perfectly happy if it just means that I'll continue with my crossword puzzles and play with grandchildren, hint, 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 he said. Maggie laughed at Pat, iterated, no pressure. He is the father to Maggie and his son Patrick, who both do not have children, yet Pat shares both of his children with his wife, Lazy Brown. At the end of the interview, Maggie teared up when she said her dad made the show gift. You made what could have just been Heyman into a cultural phenomenon. So thank you, she said, tearing up. You've had an amazing 40-plus years. Pat hugged his daughter as she wiped away tears. His final episode of Wheel of Fortune will air on June 7th at 7:30 on ABC. Maggie also asked Pat how he is feeling now that his final week of Wheel of here surprisingly okay, he responded. This was announced a long time ago, almost a year ago, so I've had time to get used to it. It's been a little bit wistful and all that, but I'm enjoying it and taking it all in and reflecting on a great run. Pat revealed he said that the show became more than a show and was ingrained into pop culture, which he called gratifying. Pat filmed his last show in April. Why he's ready. Pat also told his daughter that he could go on for years and years, but thinks now is a good time to leave. What made you decide that this is the right time for you to leave the show? Maggie wondered. I've always said I'd rather leave a couple years too early than a couple years too late, Pat responded. Could I still do it? Yeah, I think I could for a while, but there's also some other things in life that we'd like to do. I'm enjoying this last year. It's been a great 40 years, and I'm looking forward to whatever is ahead, he ended. Final spin. Pat first announced his retirement in June 2023 after the game show's season 40 finale. Well, the time has come. I've decided that our 41st season, which begins in September, will be my last, he tweeted the Monday after the finale. It's been a wonderful ride, and I'll have more to say in the coming months. Many thanks to you all. Ryan Seacrest has been named his successor. He will co-host with Vanna White, who has been by Pat's side since 1981. Maggie Sajak sat backstage in her dressing room, her heart pounding with an unexpected heaviness. She had been on Wheel of Fortune countless times, but today felt different. The air around her was buzzing with an unspoken anticipation, and for the first time, it wasn't about the game, the wheel, or even the contestants. It was about her father, Pat Sajak, the iconic host who had stood behind the wheel for more than 4 decades. For weeks, there had been murmurs among the crew about Pat's future. Maggie knew it was coming. He had hinted at it privately for some time now, but hearing him speak those words aloud today would make it all too real. He had dedicated nearly half his life to the show, and she couldn't help but feel a pain of sadness at the thought of this chapter ending. Still, she was also filled with pride. Her father had done so much for television, but now it was time for him to focus on what would make him perfectly happy, as he often said. As Maggie sat there in quiet reflection, she thought back to the early days when she'd visit him on set, barely tall enough to reach the podium. She had grown up surrounded by the spinning wheel, flashing lights, and puzzles. Wheel of Fortune had been her second home, and her father had been its steady anchor, guiding contestants and fans alike with his charm and wit. Now the realization hit that it wouldn't be the same without him. Maggie wiped away the tear that threatened to fall and gather her thoughts. She knew today would be tough. Pat had asked her to be part of his announcement, wanting the moment to be something intimate yet shared with millions of fans who had been on the journey with them for so long. And of course, Maggie couldn't say no. She had to be there for him, for the legacy, and for the show that had shaped so much of their lives. She stepped out of her dressing room, her breath catching for a moment as she saw The familiar set, the brightly colored, will glistened under the stage lights. The puzzle board standing tall and unyielding, waiting for its letters to be revealed, but today there was a stillness. To it all, even the crew seemed more subdued, aware that the announcement was imminent. Pat stood at his usual spot, his hands resting casually on the wheel. He turned and smiled when he saw her approaching, but she could sense the emotion he was hiding behind that trademark grin. He had always been a master at keeping things light, but today, even Pat Sajak couldn't escape the gravity of the moment. "Ready, kiddo?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. Maggie nodded, not trusting her voice just yet. She stepped beside him, glancing out at the small live audience they had kept today's taping intimate on purpose, a select group of loyal fans who had no idea what was about to happen. As the cameras rolled, Pat began the show with his usual energy. He banded with the contestants, tossed a few jokes, and spun the wheel with that effortless ease only he could manage. But when the time came, his tone shifted. "Now, before we continue," Pat said, turning toward the camera, "I have something important to share with you." He paused, glancing at Maggie, who instinctively reached out and took his hand. He smiled at her, squeezing it gently. "After 40 years of hosting this incredible show," he continued, his voice faltering just slightly, "I've decided that it's time for me to retire." There it was, the words hung in the air, the weight of them pressing down on Maggie's chest. She could feel the emotions welling up inside her, but she forced herself to stay strong, just as her father was doing. "I've had the time of my life here," Pat continued, his eyes glistening with emotion, "and I wouldn't trade a single moment of it. But as much as I've loved being a part of your lives for all these years, there are other things I want to do, things that will make me perfectly happy." Couldn't hold back anymore. A single tear slipped down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away, but not before Pat noticed. He turned to her, his expression softening. "It's okay, Maggie," he said quietly, his voice filled with warmth. "It's a good thing," she nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I know, Dad, I'm going to miss this." Pat pulled her into a side, hugged his arm, wrapping around on her shoulders as he turned back to the camera. "And I know the show is in great hands," he said, looking at her with pride. "Maggie's been a part of this family for as long as I have, and I have no doubt she'll continue to bring joy and excitement to all of you."